the Galactic Council claimed Earth as their colony. Then humanity shut down the galaxy. The lights went out across 9,000 worlds at exactly the same instant. On the bridge of the Council flagship, Varada's Mercy, Fleet Marshal Doscon Vey watched every navigation display go black, one after another, like a string of candles pinched out by an invisible hand. His engineers were screaming into dead comm channels, his helmsman was staring at a star map that no longer updated, and on the cracked obsidian floor of the command deck, a single human diplomat stood with her hands folded behind her back, watching him, with an expression that wasn't triumph, it was pity. "You should have asked what we were before you decided what we'd become," she said quietly. None of it had begun this way. 3 days earlier. The Council fleet had arrived above Earth in perfect, terrible silence. 11 capital ships unfolding out of subspace in a formation shaped like a closing fist. There had been no warning shot, no ultimatum broadcast in advance. Just 11 warships, each one larger than Earth's entire orbital defense network, combined, settling into geostationary orbit, like judges taking their seats. Fleet Marshal Doscon Vey's voice had crackled across every frequency on the planet, translated instantly into 2,000 languages by machines humanity didn't yet understand. By the authority of the Sovereign Council of the 31 systems, this world and its population are hereby claimed as a protectorate. Resistance is inadvisable. Compliance will be rewarded. You have 1 hour to designate a representative. Humanity, it turned out, did not need an hour. 58 minutes later, a single unarmed shuttle rose from a research facility outside Geneva and requested docking clearance. No fighter escort, no warning transmission. Just a woman in a plain gray suit, traveling alone into the belly of an alien warship, carrying nothing but a data tablet and an unreadable comm. Her name was Dr. Elena Marsh. She was 51 years old, spoke 4 languages, and had spent the last 20 years of her career studying something the rest of the world had been told didn't exist. The Council had expected panic. They got a handshake, but no one aboard that flagship understood what they were actually looking at. Doscon Vey had conquered 11 worlds in his career. He knew the pattern of first contact intimately. The initial terror, the failed resistance, the eventual surrender, the slow grinding process of pacification that followed. Humans, according to every scan his ships had run during their approach, were exactly what the Council's intelligence reports promised, a Bronze Age species by galactic standards, barely a century removed from burning coal for power, possessing no faster-than-light travel, no shield technology, no weapons capable of scratching the Varada's Mercy's hull. By every metric that mattered, Earth was the easiest annexation of his career. Dr. Marsh sat across from him in a conference chamber, built for beings twice her height, her boots dangling several inches off the floor, and told him she was authorized to negotiate the terms of humanity's surrender. "There will be no terms," Vey said. "There is only compliance." "Then I suppose we're done talking," Marsh said, and stood to leave. Vey's aide, a thin-boned Threll diplomat, named Cassia Orn, watched the human woman walk toward the door, without a single guard moving to stop her, not because they'd been ordered to let her go, but because none of them could quite believe what they were seeing. No fear, no pleading, just a woman leaving a room the way she might leave a meeting that had run long. "Wait," Cassia said. Marsh stopped. "Why are you not afraid?" Cassia asked, genuinely baffled. In 30 years of Council service, she had watched a dozen species break under first contact. This was not how the pattern worked. Marsh turned back. And for the first time, something flickered behind her calm expression, not defiance, not bravado, but something closer to grief. "Because I know what's coming," she said, "and I wish I didn't." That single sentence would haunt Cassia Orn for the rest of her life. The Council's first mistake was assuming Earth's technological silence meant technological absence. The second mistake was assigning a garrison force of only 3,000 troops to pacify a planet of 8 billion people, because their scans showed no organized resistance capability worth worrying about. The third mistake, the one that would prove fatal to the entire operation, was not asking a single question about the strange, ancient structure their long-range sensors had detected buried 3 kilometers beneath the Atlantic Ocean floor. Their analysts had flagged it as geological. A mineral formation, nothing more. They were wrong, they had always been wrong. Humanity had known they were wrong for 11 years. The truth would have stopped the invasion before it started. If anyone had bothered to look closer. Deep beneath the Atlantic, in a facility that officially did not exist, funded by a black budget that no elected government fully understood, 3,000 scientists and engineers had spent over a decade studying an object that predated humanity itself. They called it the lattice. The rest of the galaxy, had they known its true name, would have called it something closer to a terror. 90,000 years ago, a civilization the Council's own history books had erased from memory, built a network of relay nodes, spanning the entire galactic arm, nodes that made faster-than-light communication, and travel possible, for every spacefaring sea species that came after them, including the Council itself. Every Council starship's FTL drive, every subspace comm array, every navigational beacon, that let their fleets cross the void in days instead of millennia, ran on infrastructure inherited from a species that no longer existed. What the Council never knew, what no one in the galaxy knew, was that one relay node, the oldest and most central of them all, the master key to the entire network, had crash-landed on a small blue planet in an unremarkable system 900 centuries ago. Humanity hadn't built the lattice, humanity had inherited it. And after 11 years of careful, painstaking, terrified study, they had finally learned how to speak its language. Dr. Marsh returned to the flagship on the second day. This time, with 3 and a formal proposal. Humanity would submit to Council oversight in exchange for a 20-year transition period, full technological parity talks, and recognition of Earth's sovereignty over its own solar system. Fleet Marshal Vey laughed. An ugly, barking sound his translator rendered imperfectly. "You have nothing to offer and nothing to threaten me with," he said. "You possess no fleet. Your strongest weapon could not pierce a shuttle's hull plating. I could raise every city on your planet inside a single afternoon, and there is no force in this system capable of stopping me." "You're right," Marsh said. "We can't stop your fleet." "Then this negotiation is finished." "We're not negotiating with your fleet," Marsh said. "We're negotiating with everyone your fleet depends on to get home." Vey's translator hesitated on that sentence, as if unsure how to render the weight behind it. He should have listened more carefully. He would spend the rest of his life regretting that he didn't. The Garrison landed on the third morning. 3,000 Council troops in gleaming void-black armor, descending on 12 major cities simultaneously, expecting the mechanical, hollow resistance of a species that had never fought a war beyond its own atmosphere. What they found instead were empty streets. Empty government buildings, empty military bases, stripped of anything valuable, doors left open like abandoned houses. No barricades, no snipers, no suicidal last stands. Humanity hadn't fled in terror, they had simply, quietly, left the stage. Cassia Orne stood beside Fleet Marshal Vey in the command tower, overlooking a deserted New York, watching wind blow paper, trash down empty avenues, and felt something cold settle in her chest that she couldn't name yet. "Where did they go?" she asked. Nobody answered her, because nobody knew. Somewhere in the silence of that empty city, 8 billion people were exactly where they needed to be. Sheltered, prepared, and waiting for a signal that had been 11 years in the making. The Council had conquered a planet. They just hadn't noticed there was no one left to conquer. At 0300 hours on the fourth day, 3 kilometers beneath the Atlantic, Dr. Elena Marsh stood before a console that had taken her entire adult life to understand, her hand hovering over a single activation control that 11 years of secrecy, sacrifice, and quiet terror had built toward. "Once we do this," said the man beside her, Director Amos Reyes, "there's no undoing it. Every Council ship in this galactic arm loses FTL and long-range comm the instant the lattice goes dark. Not just their fleet above us, every ship, every colony, every relay, everywhere, all at once." "I know," Marsh said. "They'll be stranded. Millions of people, on both sides, in systems that suddenly can't reach help. Some of them will die out there in the dark. That's the cost, I know that too. Do we have the right to make that choice for the whole galaxy?" Marsh's hand didn't move for a long moment. She thought of the empty cities above her, the 8 billion people who had trusted a government they couldn't fully see, with the truth they'd never been told. She thought of Fleet Marshal Vey's contempt, and Cassia Orn's quiet, frightened question in that conference room. "Why are you not afraid?" And the grief she hadn't been able to hide when she answered it. "We don't have the right," she said finally, "but we have the only key that can end this without a single human city burning. So we use it, and then we spend the rest of our lives helping everyone we just stranded find their way home. That's the price, we pay it." Her hand came down, every light on every council ship in the system died at once, every subspace channel went silent, mid-transmission, across 100,000 light-years. On the bridge of the Verada's Mercy, Fleet Marshal Doskun Vey watched his entire command structure collapse into darkness, in less time than it took to draw a breath, and understood, in that instant, that he had made the single greatest miscalculation of his career. He had come to conquer a primitive world. He had, without knowing it, walked his entire fleet into the reach of a species that held the master switch to the galaxy's nervous system. And had simply, patiently, waited to see if he'd give them a reason to use it. Elena Marsh walked back onto that darkened bridge 3 hours later. This time not as a supplicant, but as the only person on that ship who understood what had just happened to the rest of the galaxy. "You should have asked what we were before you decided what we'd become," she told him. That single sentence would be repeated in council history archives for the next 1,000 years. The negotiations that followed last 6 months. They were not easy. Trust, once broken by an invasion fleet, does not rebuild quickly, and humanity's demonstration of power had terrified as many people as it had impressed. But the Satis came back online in careful, negotiated stages, first for stranded medical convoys, then for civilian transports, then, gradually, for a council that had learned, at catastrophic cost, that the galaxy's oldest inheritance had never belonged to them at all. Fleet Marshal Vey resigned his commission within the year. He never commanded another fleet. But he did, eventually, return to Earth, not as a conqueror, but as a private citizen, requesting an audience with the woman who had ended his career and quite possibly saved his life, by refusing to let his arrogance become a massacre. "Why did you let us go?" he asked her, years later, in a quiet office overlooking a city that had rebuilt itself in the meantime. "You could have kept the lattice dark forever. Crippled the entire council. Ruled the galaxy from that facility under the ocean." Elena Marsh, older now, gray threading through her hair, shook her head slowly. "Because holding the key to something doesn't give you the right to lock everyone else out of the house," she said. "It just means you're finally the one responsible for making sure the door works for everybody. That's not power, Marshal. That's a burden. We just happen to be the ones standing closest when it landed in our hands." Humanity never used the lattice as a weapon again. They didn't have to. The entire galaxy had already learned, in one long and terrible night, exactly what humanity was capable of. And exactly what they had chosen not to become. Earth's seat on the newly reformed council was not granted out of gratitude. It was granted out of necessity, because no treaty involving the lattice could be written, ratified, or trusted without the signature of the species that had built the door, and now guarded its key. Cassia Orn, promoted in the chaos that followed Vey's resignation, became the council's first liaison to Earth. A posting she had once considered a punishment, and came, over the following decade, to regard as the most important work of her long life. She kept a single memory close through all of it, a gray-suited woman walking calmly out of a room full of armed strangers, unafraid not because she was reckless, but because she understood something her captors didn't. Power, real power, was never about the size of your fleet, it was about what you were willing to do and, just as importantly, what you refused to do. Once you finally held the switch that could end the world, historians across 100 systems would spend the next century arguing over what to call that fourth day above Earth. Some named it the Long Silence. Others called it the Reckoning. On Earth itself, it was remembered more simply, in classrooms and kitchens alike, as the day the galaxy finally learned to knock, before it walked into someone else's home.